what's up? This is Mia, and today we are going to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of my seeds starting this year, and we're gonna transplant them out here. So let's begin. It is a nice cloudy day. We have some showers coming over in this area, I would say today and all of next week. So I figured it would be a great time to start getting my seeds out, my seedlings out, and to put them in the garden beds. If you remember, about, I would say 2 months ago, I started my seedlings. And I did a mixture of worm compost and seed starting mix. Now, if you remember, some of the things that I planted at the time were peppers, tomatoes, cabbage, broccoli, which was definitely some new things I started from seed. And then I did a lot of herbs. So without further ado, let me go ahead and show you how they did and kind of explain to you what happened. This is the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the first thing we're going to cover is the herbs. I have a lot of different herbs over here: thyme, dill, cilantro, basil, and as you can tell, they did really good and turned out beautifully. So, and lemon balm. So now it's time to go ahead and transfer those. And here goes the sage, the basil, and the cilantro. That did really well. So you notice how this turned out really good and it looks very beautiful and full. Well, vegetables didn't do so hot. Let's take a look at that. So here are the vegetables. As you can tell, they've grown, but they didn't do too well as I was hoping. Now, the tomato seeds actually did pretty good. The green pepper seeds, this was a combination of new and old seeds. So some of them grew, some of them didn't, some of them grew very slowly. And if you watched the previous video, I was talking about germinating those seeds. Some of them actually germinated, so that's a good thing. Then when you get over here to the broccoli, the cabbage, the celery, and the Brussels sprouts, my Brussels sprouts for the most part died out. My cabbage didn't do well at all. My broccoli, I have probably 1 or 2 plants. My red cabbage did awesome. It's actually coming through. This was during a time where I was actually trying to understand how often you should water your seedlings. So this was my fault on this one. It went about 4 days without watering. And I learned from this bed that with seedlings, that is detrimental. They need to be watered like every 2 days. I also think what played a part in the outcome of my plants was the type of trays they were in, because all my plants in my black trays did great. The ones that were in these biodegradable ones, they were cheap, but look at the results. They look like they just didn't do too well in these containers. So next year I'm not going to be using these. Another thing, I definitely got way more gnats on this than these. So next year we're not doing biodegradable. We're actually going to look for a better version of these black cells and use those for next year's seedlings. Let's touch on the transitioning period that I had to go through with these seedlings. You really don't want to bring them out and just sit them in the sun. What I had to do, I took about a week and a half, and I started bringing them out piece by piece or bit by bit, day by day. So in my case, I started on the first day. I left it out for about 2-3 hours, brought it back in. And I did that, and I increased slowly on each day. And I made sure they were in a shady spot, and it started on a cloudy day. Luckily, this week has been some sun, but not overbearing. So these plants were able to transition very, very well. Now we're about to take them and put them in the gardens. They've gotten acclimated to the environment. I want to see how they transfer and see if they grow and produce vegetables. Okay, so we got one bed already cleared out for the most part. This is going to be the bed for our tomatoes and our basil. So to get started, it's real simple. I'm starting on the corner and I'm just making a spot just for me to know this is where I want my plants to go. Now if you notice, my soil is really soft. Last year, or at the end of the winter, we always do our due diligence during the fall to come in and throw a bunch of leaves in the garden beds and also get some compost and put it in here. And then we just leave it alone for the winter, and we don't step into the garden beds much at all. But doing so makes it so much easier to manipulate the soil. As you can see, I can practically do it with my hands. Now that we got our spot designated on this side, let's see how this goes. So since this is already coming apart, we're gonna start with our Roma. Yeah, we're gonna start with our Roma tomatoes. This is what I was saying I didn't care for with the beds. As you can tell, me trying to pull it out, it's literally breaking apart. And maybe there's a technique to do it better. I'll look into it. But for me, this is kind of an inconvenience because now, as you can see, the roots have came through the garden bed, through the cell. So what we're gonna do to try not to harm the plants or the seedlings is trying to break up the cell as much as possible. Where we're gonna gently, there you go, break it apart. I'm gonna keep those two together. As you can see, the roots are very intertwined on this one, so I'm not even gonna pull it apart. I'm just gonna put it in the garden bed, just sit it in there. I'm coming back to it. So what I'm gonna do is finish putting these in the bed, and then we're gonna cover them up and see how they do this season. Now we're gonna focus on, so now that we put our little tomatoes in there, our baby tomatoes, now we're going to focus on putting in the basil. Now, even though the tomato seedlings are tiny, if my memory serves me correctly, tomatoes can get tall and wild, so they can easily branch out to here. That was one of the issues I had with my peppers last year. They literally didn't grow because the tomatoes took over. At that time also, I didn't really trip off the importance of pruning your tomatoes. Lesson learned doing that this year. But what we're gonna do is put our basil, I would say about a foot out, so that it can get its fair share of sun and it won't be overcrowded by the tomatoes. So we're gonna see how that goes this year. Now that we got that done, let's go ahead and get our basil, and we're gonna see how these come out the pack compared to the other ones. Now, look at that. It's a lot easier to get them. You can definitely smell them. They smell wonderful. And that was so much easier to pull out my tray. Still broke apart a little bit, but I was able to get actually more soil than I did before. Let me go ahead, that's our first one. Let me go ahead and fill the rest of these in. Then we're gonna move to the other side. Okay, you guys, it's been a few days since I last was in the garden, and we had quite a bit of rain. So I came back out in the garden to see how everything looks. So let's take a look at it. Well, we got good news. Not only are they doing good, they're holding strong. Even our cabbage is doing awesome. And our sage and oregano. Guys, things are looking really good out here right now. And I'm gonna keep coming out, seeing how they're doing, because it's almost time for us to harvest our greens. Look at that. Look at my square garden working. You see that? It's my square foot garden. Look at that. That's awesome. So it's almost time for me to come out and start harvesting, and that's what we got going. There you have it. We successfully transferred the seedlings into the garden bed, Gave them a few days. They're still surviving. So now we're just going to see how they do the rest of the season. Ron just brought home, let's see, 2 more plants. We got some more basil, and we got something called Sweet 100 tomatoes. So, or cherry tomatoes. So that's our 3rd type of tomato that's getting added to the garden bed. Like I said before, I have a love-hate relationship with tomatoes, but in this case, I mean, they're free, so I'm down. All right, so one more piece of excitement before I get off this camera. I planted asparagus this year, and I was so nervous about them growing, but they're actually growing. Now, we can't harvest them for another 2 or 3 years, but the fact that they're growing is awesome. Let me show you guys. Look at that action right there. Bam! These are asparagus plants that I put in a couple of months ago, and they are actually growing. Oh my gosh. I'm just like so excited. I gotta go and come in here and weed the beds out, and dun dun dun. Didn't I tell you about those cherry tomatoes? Look at them. They're coming back again. Without my help. Without my help. Anywho, I gotta come in and weed the bed. It's a ton of them too. Look at that. Anywho, focus, Mia. My beds are getting taken over by cherry tomatoes. Can you believe that? I'm gonna come in and weed the beds. I didn't do it because I wanted to make sure that I didn't pull these out by accident. But now that they're starting to stand up and make themselves known, we're good to go. So that was my little piece of extra, guys. You know, I'm excited, and just stay with us. With that said, thank you for tuning in. If you have not already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like button, and notification bell to keep up with our videos, and it helps us out on Cranberry Vintage. I got all that out in one breath. You guys have an awesome day, and stay super-tastic.